International business is also another thing that I would like to talk about. I found an article that uh, to me it was very fascinating. It was 10 forces reshaping global business. And the first thing it said was America first. And what that meant was, with everything now, especially in our government, the tariffs, for instance, have kind of put America first on things. It ranges not goods imported not only from China but also from our allies, or such as Canada, Mexico, and EU. So those tariffs have made an impact there, and we put America first. It's obviously it's creates some dilemmas. I mean, you're going to have issues with trading and things and whatnot, but I think they were trying to strengthen the U.S. industry as a whole. That way, things were more here. The second point that it would mention is China, and it's pivoting. It says it's pivoting in two dimensions. Externally, the government is working to ease the nation's dependence on Western markets for its exports, but it also is uh, investing in nations such as Morocco, Turkey, things like that, in order to bypass those U.S. trade restrictions in, partnering with their neighboring countries. There's also, it says, the rise of a confident global south. You know, international business has been typically led by the Western part of the world. Economies in Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, collectively known as the Global South, are gaining agency on the world stage. These economies account for more than 60% of the world's population and are projected to grow much faster than developed economies well into the future. As far as for, let's say, for America, for instance, that could end up being an issue later on. Although the thing is here, while they're highly diverse, the more than 130 nations of the Global South generally share a focus on economic growth and deepening of international trade. That could benefit us in the long run. The fourth thing that it mentions is Europe's reckoning. It says the European Union faces a challenging decade as it grapples with economic stagnation. That is something too that is become an issue. Economies are getting stagnant. Things are slowing down. You have all the things going on. AI is heavily being used in so many ways now, to the point that there's less people working because AI is doing the jobs of people. There's many trade shifts. For instance, this mentions a tectonic trade shift. It says geopolitical and national security considerations are fundamentally reconfiguring the future of trade. There's things like that that can affect international business. Uh, I learned in an international business class we had to study countries and learn so much about them, down to mannerisms, the things we say. Like in America, we say okay or do a hand gesture. A hand gesture in some countries like that is taken as an insult, or some cultures where they don't see the bottom of your feet because if you take your shoe off, it starts an act of war almost. Like for instance, there's just things like that within international business you need to be aware of. I know uh, we typically, at a wedding, it's white, and then at funerals in America, you typically wear black. There are countries that it is the complete opposite as far as white typically represents death. You need to be aware of cultural things, especially when you're dealing with international business. Take some time to study, who you're trading with and things like that. And another thing at point is now there's the race for technological supremacy. Uh, for instance, semiconductors is a major thing that everything uses. It says competition for technological supremacy in the value chains of high tech products is intensifying, especially with AI. You have quantum computing and semiconductors are at the center of all these things. US and China are the chief rivals. The US currently leads in AI development, but China is swiftly closing the gap. That's something, especially today with all the AI that is definitely being inputted now. You can pretty much get on your computer and ask it anything, and it will give you an AI answer for everything. You really need to check those because a lot of times they're not accurate. The point 7 is navigating economic nationalism. In a global environment marked with rising nationalism and great power rivalry, countries are trying to gain economic advantages and reduce vulnerability. Those things we need to focus on too. You need to see where you have strengths and make sure you know where your weaknesses are. And there's conflicts that go on that you need to be aware of as well in different places. And another thing is this one of the points that I found interesting was it says climate refuses to be ignored. It says the need to adapt and to mitigate the impact of extreme weather events and rising sea levels driven by climate change continues to shape global business. Many nations, particularly several emerging markets, remain vulnerable to those extreme climates. There's several areas that the weather is a big factor. One of the big things I know in the U.S. that it's made it is you definitely have the rising solar energy, which is sustainable energy. It's less carbon emissions. Here and locally, they have put up wind turbines or the big windmills on top of the mountains to generate wind energy. You get out in western Oklahoma, they're everywhere. It seems like you went from cornfields to windmill fields now. But those are things too that are very important to be aware of is how much the climate affects overall. And